Hello.
Hello. Hey, Diamond.
Hey, how are you?
Good. If y'all come in, if you can mute yourself, that would be great. Let me admit all. We are gonna wait till about 7:35 to get started. I hope y'all had a good day. It's about 75 people who signed up, so we're gonna before they come in. Hello, everybody that just came in. We're gonna wait till about 7:35, so in about 2 minutes, we will start. I just wanna give everybody time to come on in. Let me see. Let me see if anyone. Let me see how I can do this. Okay, everybody, we are gonna go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for signing up for tonight's session. I did not expect about 75 people to sign up, but I want to say thank you so much. And I really pray that you get some information tonight that you can use for whenever you take your licensure exam. I know a couple of you all have already taken your licensure exam and you didn't do well. So I'm praying that next time you take it, you're gonna pass it. So first of all, I'm just gonna go through for tonight. Also, I have a free session with Zoom, y'all. So at about 40 minutes, they're probably gonna kick us out. But what I want you to do is just log right back in. It's the same pin and everything. And we're just gonna keep it going. So I'm just gonna give you a little bit of information about the licensure exam. So you know that the exam is about 170 questions total, but only 150 of them are calculated. So I believe they use the other 20 just for like future questions that they're gonna put on the exam, just to probably see like how the test how we do with the questions and if they fit. And also, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat so that I can see them. So again, the exam is about 170 questions. It takes about 4 hours to, well, you have about 4 hours to pass the exam. I think I did, well, the first time I took my exam, I think it took me about 3.5 hours. Well, almost 4 hours. The second time I took it, it was about 3.5 hours. So I'll give you a little bit of information about my experience when I took the exam. So I took the exam July of 2019, y'all, and some of the resources I used was the MSW Pocket Prep. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that. I think they have revamped it now, so there's a lot of more information on it now. But it's just an app that you can put on your phone. And so I studied that. It was helpful. And I also studied the ASWB book. So that book is about 415 pages. I used that book as well. The first time I took my exam, I needed a score of a 98 and I got a 96. And so I was completely bummed because I had told everybody that I was about to take this exam and I was going to pass and do all these amazing things, and I failed it. And so I was completely heartbroken. And so it took me a year before I even decided to give this exam another try. And I wasn't even going to do it then, but I got a promotion at my job. And so I went from working on the inpatient side of case management in the hospital, I went to the outpatient side. So now I'm a cancer social worker. And so I work with patients who are in treatment for chemotherapy and radiation. So that's what I do now. And they told me I had a year to take my licensure exam and pass it. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I took my exam. I used the Therapist Development Center, which was really helpful. If you are able to make the investment, I would definitely recommend it. It's a great resource. Everything that I saw on the exam was something that was covered on Therapist Development Center. Another thing that I did, I just went ahead and read that entire ASWB book from beginning to end. I read the entire book. And the second time I took the exam, I needed a score of a 99 and I got a 121. So I did really well on the exam the second time, praise God. And so I was like, you know what, Reginique, this is good information. You should probably share it. So that's my experience with taking the exam. Some of the themes that I saw in the exam, y'all, I took the exam this time around. I took the exam about a month ago. So some of the themes that I saw on the exam was macro social work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with macro social work, but that's like policy, advocacy, program evaluation, and all of these other macro topics, dealing with communities, community organizing, things like that. And if you are able to, I really suggest you go ahead and start studying that information because I saw it a lot on my exam. I also saw crisis intervention, risk, ethics, and theories. One of the theories that I saw on my exam that I knew nothing about was dialectical behavior theory. I knew nothing about that, but it's something that Therapist Development Center talked about. And so I was able to say, okay, you know what? They talked about mindfulness, so I'm gonna click this answer. And it was right. And so the test is broken up into like reasoning and then it's recall. So the test is 60% reasoning. So it's like you have to know as a social worker, what should I do first? What should I do second? And then the other half or a little bit of the exam is like recall. And it's either you know that information or you don't. So if I were you, I would really focus on those questions where it's asking you to use your social work skills, because that's where you're going to get majority of your points. If you've already taken the exam, you know that it's broken up into like there are some questions that's going to say, what would the social worker do first or next? And then there's some questions that are going to say, what would the social worker, what's the best thing to do to help this client, or what's the most effective thing to do to help this client? And so, when it comes to the first and the next questions, all of the answers may be something that you can do at some point, but they're asking you what's the first thing that you should do. And so one of the tricks I use was, if they gave me 4 answers, it's 4 answers, and they say, well, what would the social worker do first? I used to, what did I do? So I know that all of the things may be something that you do, but what's the first thing that you should do? If the patient is sitting in front of you, let's say your patient comes in and he's admitted to having suicidal ideations. What's the first thing and they ask you, what's the first thing that you're gonna do as a social worker? If this patient is in front, try to picture, if you can, try to picture your client sitting in front of you. What is the first thing that you're gonna do? And that's what helped me with those questions. As far as the best and the most, questions, those are a little tricky because at some point all of the questions may be right, but what I find is that the right answer normally has all of the other answers inside of it, and you'll see that on like the macro social work part. And so I know that a lot of people use if you watch Philip Luttrell and everybody else on YouTube, you do, someone asked, what's your cash app? I'll put my cash app at the end, and y'all don't. I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart, so I don't expect anything from you all, but I'll put it there if you want to sow a seed. So I know that 2 of the acronyms that people use is aspirins and Spherify, or however you say it. But if I can be honest, I really didn't use them. I may have used them about 4 times, and you have to be very careful when you use those, because the exam is not cookie cutter. So some of the things that you would use the Spherify first for the first and next, the first thing is safety, and then you acknowledge the client's feelings. A lot of those times, that's not what you're gonna do. And so I really want you to have those acronyms, but I also want you to use your knowledge and your understanding, because you cannot apply that to every question. And I have 3 questions that we're gonna go through at the end, and then I'll show you why you have to be very careful when you are trying to use those acronyms. So I know that I told you all that I was gonna give you all tips. So if you have a pen or a paper, I want you to write this down. If I'm going too fast, please let me know, so that I can slow down, because I do talk a little fast, y'all. So when you are reading those long vignettes about these patients and things, and a lot of times some of that stuff you can throw it in or out, but what I want you to be mindful, if they put any type of demographic information in your little summary, in your vignette, I want you to pay attention to that, because they're putting that for a reason. So let's say you're working with a gay client, or you're working with an African American or a Hispanic client. All of this demographic information is for a reason. So 9 times out of 10, if they have said that you're working with an Asian male client or a Hispanic client, that's a cultural question, and it's gonna require a cultural answer. I'm gonna say that again. If it's a cultural question, it's 9 times out of 10 gonna require a cultural answer. And so if you have the ASWB book, you can go to type it in, African American clients or Hispanic clients, and they tell you everything about that culture that stands out and that is different from another culture. That's not something you have to know at the top of your head, but I want you to be prepared. If it does come on your test, you'll be able to say, okay, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer. So that's that. But I also want you to keep in mind these 5 things. So you're always gonna wanna know, after you've read this vignette, you're gonna highlight, what's the setting? So who am I? Am I a school social worker? Am I a community organizer? Am I working as a crisis intervention specialist? What is my role as a social worker, and where are we? The next thing you're going to do is highlight who is your client. So is your client an African American? How old is your client? All of these things you're gonna highlight. You're also gonna want to know who referred this client to me. So how was this client referred? Did their pastor refer them? Were they referred by the school social worker? Were they referred by a physician? All of these things are important to know. Then you're gonna want to know how long have I been working with this client. So one of the things that I found in my exam is you have to really pay attention to the length of the duration of how long of you working with your client. So that may be a lot of the questions will say a therapist is working or a social worker is working with a client in completing their initial assessment. So if this is an initial assessment, you know that there has been no report that has been built with this client. And that because of that, as a social worker, you're gonna move differently. You're not gonna respond to that client's needs the same way you would respond to a client that you've been working with 3 months. So you're always gonna wanna know, how long have I been working with this client? And that's gonna be important when you get into, let's say, crisis intervention. So let's say they give you a vignette and they say a social worker has been working with a client for 4 months surrounding his depression. The client comes into services today and says he's having suicidal ideations. The way that you're going to respond to that client is different than how you will respond to a client who you're just seeing. Because you've been seeing this client for 4 months, you may know that the client has been making threats every time they've come to session. And so you may not report that client or try to get them hospitalized. You may try to work with that client on, or you may want to work with him on cognitive restructuring, or even developing a suicide contract or a safety plan, things like that. And I'm not saying that you're not going to assess for suicide for those clients. At all times, if a client tells you that they're suicidal or they're having thoughts of depression, anything like that, one of the first things you're going to do is complete a risk assessment. A risk assessment, y'all. I cannot say that enough. Then the last thing you're going to want to know is, what are the symptoms? So what are the symptoms? What did this client come in? And a lot of times they're going to tell you in the vignette, client reports lack of appetite, disinterest in hobbies, things like that, just to kind of lead you to the right answer. So be on the lookout for those 5 things. Another thing, you always want to get informed consent prior to starting services with your client. You always want to get informed consent. Do not start therapy, do not start services with any client without getting their informed consent. And in informed consent, always discuss like the scope of confidentiality, when you may report, or when you're obligated to report it, if they're a threat to themselves or others. That's something you always want to discuss with your client before you start services. Another thing I want you all to know is, whatever they put in quotations should be taken literally. So always look out for, in those vignettes, if they have the client says something and it's in quotations, they want you to take that literally. So what do I mean by literally? I mean that if a client says, I just don't know what to do with my child, and that's in quotations, they literally mean they do not know what to do with their child. So in the answer, you always want to seek to help them find ways. In that case, your answer would involve helping them find ways to deal with their child. So again, whatever they have in quotations should be taken literally. Another thing, because this is something that I do, well, the first time I took my exam, do not like rush through the vignettes just trying to read it, because what you will do is you'll miss out on that last sentence. I'm not sure if any of you have already taken the exam, but in that last sentence, that's where they tell you what they want you to do. So you have to pay attention to that, because they may not be asking you what's the best thing the social worker will do. They may be asking you, what is the social worker least likely going to do? So always pay attention to that last sentence in the vignette, and always make sure your answer ties back in the scenario. Always make sure your answer ties back in the scenario, y'all. I've already talked about the first next questions. I've already talked about the best and most questions. Again, when it comes to the best and most questions, all of the answers may be right, but one of them is the best answer. And a lot of times the best answer is gonna involve everything that the other answers would have said. And so also, this is a test of your skill set. I'm gonna say that again. This is a test of your skill set. So do not choose answers that tell you to do nothing. I'm gonna say that one more time for the people in the back. This is a test of your skill set. So do not choose any answer that tells you to do nothing. And so what does that answer look like? That says when the social worker assumes, the social worker should assume blah blah blah. No, we never assume. The social worker should refrain. We never refrain. The social worker should ignore. We never ignore. So refrain from choosing answers that have those words in it. Very rarely will that be the next the best answer. Do the vignettes have more than one question? No. If I'm understanding you correctly, the vignette, like, it should only have one question that they're asking you. Because there's only one right answer. And so the next thing I want to talk about is risk. So risks and safety issues was something that I saw on my exam, and I can guarantee you is going to be on your exam. And that's because as social workers, when we're licensed, we have a legal and ethical mandate to protect the public and our clients. So those questions where they're asking you what would, like, when it comes to protecting a client, protecting the public. Let's say if a client say he wants to kill his boss, or he wants to kill himself, he wants to go and shoot up a school. They want to know, are you able to keep the public safe? So in those questions, you always want to make sure you're looking for answers that keep everyone safe. No, I meant, do they have multiple questions in one? No, I meant, do they have multiple questions? No, ma'am. So every vignette should just have one question. Some of them are about 3 to 4 sentences, but it gets down to one, it boils down to one question. And so what I'm gonna do now, because I wanna have time for question and answer, and I do wanna give y'all some information that I have and some things that I have coming up. But I want to go over 3 topics that I feel are very important for you all. So the first is child abuse and neglect. I don't have any experience with working with children, but if you're like me and you don't, you're gonna need this information. So when it comes to child abuse and neglect, when it comes to reporting it, you always want to look out for the warning signs. So what are some of the signs? Well, not warning signs. You always want to look out for the signs. So what are signs that a child may be physically abused? So if the child has bruising, yes, Lester. So visual bruising in places that you really can't account for, like a child have bruising up here, like some children play and they fall, so they may have like scrapes on their knees, on their elbows or things. But if you find bruising on a child's back or anything like that, you definitely want to look into that situation a little further. And you always want to look out for any mark that resembles like a hand or an object. So obviously, if I pop a child, then probably my handprint is gonna be on them. So you wanna look out for signs like that. For when it comes to sexual abuse, what you wanna look for is like a marked change in a child's behavior. So this child was going about life, they were happy, they were joyful and things like that, and all of a sudden this child is acting different, they're strange, they're not acting normal. You want to look out for things like that, because that could be a sign of sexual abuse. And also another sign of sexual abuse is when a child is like acting out inappropriately in ways that are not normal with their development. So we know, like, in early development, child is like 4 years old, they're learning about their body. So they're not fondling, but they're getting to know themselves. So they may touch themselves inappropriately. Things like that are normal. But when it comes to a child fondling themselves or groping, someone else, most times is an adult that they touch inappropriately. You want to be on the lookout for things like that. Bedwetting, that's another sign of a child that a child may be sexually abused. So that's child abuse. But then when it comes to child neglect, so some of the signs you look for child neglect would be like malnourishment. The child is coming to school, they're very thin, they're frail, they're looking like they're not eating at home, or they're unkept, they're looking like they're not being bathed at home. They come to class with the same clothes on, things like that. You want to be on the lookout for child neglect. And so a lot of times when it comes to answering child abuse and neglect questions on your test, those are going to be 9 times out of 10 is going to say that a social worker, a school social worker referred the child to you. And so I want you to be mindful. The teacher, not a school social worker, I said the teacher refers that child to the social worker. So be mindful, because if a teacher is reporting that there's something going on with a child, you really want to look into that, because teachers don't just well, in some cases they do, but teachers see a lot of children. And so if they're reporting something like that, you want to definitely look into that situation and be mindful, because the law says that if there is reasonable suspicion that a child is being abused or neglected, then we must file a report immediately. So I'm gonna say that again. The law requires that if we, the social worker, find reasonable suspicion. What is that reasonable suspicion? That's those signs that we talked about. So with the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the neglect, there are certain things that we look out for. If we see that present on that child, we have to file a report immediately. We file a report before we call their families to come into the office to ask them more questions. We file a report before we get more information from the teacher. We file a report before we refer them to a physician, all of that stuff. You file your report first with CPS, and then you can continue to investigate. So I want you to know that, because they are going to have questions like that. And I actually put one that we're going to go over shortly that is going to test your knowledge on that. So that is child abuse and neglect. The other, another topic that I saw on my exam was elderly or dependent person abuse. So when it comes to elderly abuse, elderly person is anybody 65 and older, and a dependent person is anybody who relies on someone else to care for them. So that's somebody that may be in a wheelchair, somebody that's on Social Security, somebody that's mentally or physically disabled, and they are they are abused often or neglected. So that's something that they want to make sure you're able to be on the lookout for. And just as child abuse and neglect, we are legally required to report this abuse, but we don't report this abuse to CPS. We report it to Adult Protective Services. 9 times out of 10 if you see this on the exam, it's not going to ask you about elderly abuse. It's going to ask you about elderly neglect. And so when it comes to elderly neglect, you want to look out for whether the patient is malnourished, which could be because they're not taking care of themselves, or the person who is getting their check is not taking care of them. A lot of times when it comes to elderly patients, there is that risk for self-neglect. So what does that mean? That means that they're not taking care of themselves. Maybe because they may have some early signs of dementia, they may be forgetful, they may not have an appetite, things like that. So you always want to be on the lookout for those things. You always want to be on the lookout for abandonment. When it comes to elderly patients, abandonment could be the person that's taking care of them. Yes, geriatrics. The patient that the family member that's taking care of them is getting their check. They go out of town for the weekend and leave the client at home by themselves to fend for themselves. That's not okay. That client may end up in the hospital. If we have any case managers that work in the hospital. I worked in the hospital. I saw this a lot. And family members would get really upset with me when I would tell them, hey, I may have to report this to APS because you've dropped your father off in the ER and you've gone to Florida, to Miami for the weekend. What are we supposed to do with your dad? You have to come and pick him up, find someone who can take care of him. Another way that elderly patients are abused or exploited is financially. So someone getting their check and is not taking care of them, and is spending their money on them and not taking care of the client. That's something that may be on the check as well. I'm sorry, on the check. That's something that may be on your test. The last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll go over some. So I have 3 practice questions, is domestic violence, y'all, because domestic violence surprisingly was, I'm not surprised that it was on my exam, but there were a lot of questions surrounding domestic violence. But domestic violence is something that's very heavy in our culture, and you will see it on the exam. So some of the signs that your client may be being abused by their girlfriend or their boyfriend, husband or their wife, is if the client reports it. Sometimes the clients will tell you that the person is abusive. They may say they're fearful of their partner, or they may say, my partner is very jealous, or they're controlling. Those are some of the things that you want to look out for. And if you suspect that your client is being abused, ask them, just straight up ask them, because that's the best way you're going to get that information. And so one of the things that I want you to be familiar with, you don't have to know it by heart, but you always want to be mindful of the cycles of violence when it comes to domestic violence. And so I know some of the parts of the cycle is like tension building. So that's when the person is building up to becoming abusive. And then there's the battering, when the client is actually abused. And then there's the loving portion, like the honeymoon, when after the abuse has happened, they come back and they're sorry and they're never gonna do it again. And then that cycle just keeps recurring. But so you want to know the cycle of violence. But what I want you to know is, as a social worker, it is not our job to, and I thought this was weird as well, but it is not our job to report domestic violence, y'all. It is not a social worker's job to report domestic violence. We report child abuse and neglect. We report adult abuse and neglect, but we do not report domestic violence. Why don't we report domestic violence? Because it's not our role. So physicians, medical doctors, they report domestic violence. But as a social worker, you want your client to feel safe coming to you, talking to you about abuse that is going on. If it is around kids, then so in some states, they say if domestic violence is happening around kids, then report. But you really don't want to report unless you know for a fact that that child was harmed. If that child was harmed, then yes, you definitely want to be reporting, making a report to CPS for child abuse. So one of the things that we do, if the client doesn't want to leave, so let's say you're working with your client and your client tells you, hey, I'm being abused. So I said the first part of the cycle of violence was, yes, tension building. Thank you, Amanda. So if your client does not want to leave, your client comes in, they tell you they're being abused, but they don't want to leave. As part of your intervention, one of the first things you're going to do is create a safety plan with that client. And so what that safety plan does is ensure that if abuse does happen, or prior to abuse happening, your client has something they can do or somewhere they can go to be safe. It's so it's tension building, it's battering, and then it's the honeymoon. And you can Google cycles of violence PDF on Google, and it'll tell you, because that's the abbreviated version. It may be like I believe it's three steps, like I said, but it may go into more detail. So you want to go on Google or go to your ASWB guide to make sure you're getting the correct information on that. So again, if your client says that they do not want to leave their spouse or their partner who is abusing them, as a social worker, it is not our job to make a client leave. We do not want to bully our clients into leaving. We want to be a safe space for them where they can come and talk about what's going on. So we do not want to try to push them out of their relationship. Now, if the client comes to you and say, I want to leave, then you work with the client on leaving that relationship. But if the client makes it clear to you that they want to stay in their relationship and they want to work on their relationship, one of the first things that you're going to do as a social worker is create a safety plan with your client. And that is because, so the reason why we don't tell them to leave their spouse if they say they don't want to leave is that's supporting clients' right to self-determination. And we are not bullies, we're social workers. So that's why we don't try to push them to leave. So definitely be on the lookout for answers that tell you, like if you're being asked, what should the social worker do when a client reports they're being abused? Be on the lookout for answers that tell you things like push the client out of the relationship or try to get the client to see why the relationship is not helpful. That sounds good, but that's not the right answer, because for all of our clients, we give them the good and the bad. We help them weigh out their options. So you want to stay in this relationship. Okay, let's look at the pros of staying in this relationship, but let's also look at the cons of staying in this relationship. And that's our job as social workers. And so in terms of, so let's say, this is the last thing, let's say a client, well, you're doing a couples therapy session and this is your initial session, and your clients come in and it's a male and a woman, two men, it doesn't matter. But one of them discloses that their partner is abusive, but they want to start working it out and they want to start couples therapy. We do not treat couples in couples therapy if there is abuse going on. Even if there's a history of abuse and you believe that the abuse may reoccur, or if the abuse is occurring in this minute, we do not treat them with couples therapy. And the reason we don't do that is because if you do couples therapy on the line, you know that a lot of times in couples therapy, things are being brought to the light, and behavior patterns are being outed and things like that. And so it can cause a lot of shame, it can cause a lot of anger, and it will exacerbate it'll exacerbate anger that may have already been there from the person that is doing the abuse. So before we treat couples in couples therapy, if there is abuse going on, we want to get them to an individual. We want to refer them to individual therapy, because what we want them to do is work on their own issues separately, develop those coping mechanisms and those skills that's going to help them refrain from even from being abusive. And then once they are in a healthy place individually, then they may come back to us and say, okay, now we want to work on couples therapy. But we always, if we find out that that we're working with a couple and there's abuse going on, we always want to refer them out to individual treatment, because they have to build that support system for themselves and get those skills before they can come to couples therapy. And that is, I'm gonna take questions. Hold on. Yes, thank you so much. I was reading. Yes, so I'm gonna give y'all some information on that. Right now, I'm going to share my screen with you all, because before we end, I want to go over give me a minute, y'all, because I don't know what I am doing on here. So I'm trying to, so if somebody said, how's the test working with COVID? So it's working the same, but you have to wear a mask. So my test center was still full, but you had to wear a mask the entire time, which was a lot for me, but it went well. So can y'all see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So let's look at this first question, y'all. I'm going to read it. It says, I don't want y'all to look at the second question, so hold on. So during a family therapy session, the social worker notices that the couple's 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old stepchild have bandages on their hands. So the mother discloses tearfully that they need to find a new babysitter because they can't trust their 16-year-old son to stay at home with their young children because she super glued. Can y'all see? Somebody said blank. Y'all can't see. Hold on. Chat. Blank screen. Okay, hold on. Let me put, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the question in the chat because I'm smart. And I'm going to have to figure out. So that is the first question. So during a family therapy session, the social worker notices that the couple's 8-year-old daughter and their 6-year-old stepchild have bandages on their hands. The mother discloses tearfully that, and excuse that that's an error, that they need to find a new babysitter because they cannot trust their 16-year-old son to stay home with the younger children because he super glued their hands to the door. The husband shakes his head and says, "We already dealt with this. It won't happen again." What should the social worker do next? And just put your answer in the chat. And remember those things I told you to look out for. What's your role? Who's the client? If you can, how is the client referred? And what is the problem? Okay. So yes, so everybody says C, inform the family that the social worker must file a child abuse report. Yes, that's the very first thing that you're gonna do always, because literally these children have bandages on their hands and they have told you that the son has super glued their hands. So that is definitely child abuse. Find out how they dealt with it. In some cases, that somebody would have chosen that answer. Find out how they dealt with it, because in those cases when we're looking at those acronyms that we use, fair fee, one of the first things it says is, well, the first thing it says is safety, but another thing it says is to assess. So a lot of times they tell you always choose the answer with assess, but when it comes to reporting child abuse, we're not really going to assess. If there is reasonable suspicion, we're going to report, and then we can assess. And so it says B, document the incident in the notes. That's something we'll do later. Ask if other incidents like this has happened. That's something that we're going to do later, but that is not the first thing that we're going to do. The first thing that we are going to do is report, make a child abuse report. So I'm putting the second answer in the chat right now. The second question. Oh, hold on. Let me see. I think it went to just one person. So I'm putting it, paste. So this is the second question. It says, you are completing a home visit on an elderly patient and you notice that the house is full of garbage. There is no food in the refrigerator. The patient appears thin and frail, and he has missed 2 primary care appointments. What should the social worker do best to assist this patient? Let's see what you all chose. So everybody chose D, call Adult Protective Services. Yes. So let's look at the other answers though, because sometimes these can get very tricky. So the first answer is contact family. We are not going to contact this patient's family because that is violating their HIPAA rights. Unless the patient gives us consent to call his family, we are not going to call any patient's family. Refer them to Meals on Wheels. If you know if you don't know Meals on Wheels, they provide meals for patients in a community. That may be something we do at some point, but that's not gonna be the thing. That's not gonna best assist this patient. The third answer, call a physician to reschedule a doctor's appointment. That's not gonna best serve this patient. Because it says he missed his doctor appointments, but it didn't say he had any like medical conditions that required attention immediately. So always be on the lookout for that. So the best answer is Adult Protective Services. And so remember when I told you, when it comes to the best and the first answer for the first question, the answer was C. And so when it comes to the best, when they ask you what's the best thing the social worker can do, or what's the most appropriate thing the social worker can do to assist the client, I told you that most times all of the answers are going to be right. They're going to be something that we would do at some point. But which answer is the thing that is going to best serve this client? So when we look at this answer, contact the family, refer to Meals on Wheels, call a physician to reschedule. Those are all good things to do. But when you call Adult Protective Services, they are going to, at some point, they can do all of the other three. And so what I said in the beginning, I said the best answer is 9 times out of 10 gonna be able to, is gonna include all of those other choices. So look at this one, call Adult Protective Services. Adult Protective Services can help reschedule doctor's appointments. They can refer patients to Meals on Wheels, and they can contact family if needed. The best thing as a social worker you're gonna do is call Adult Protective Services. So I'm gonna put the third question in here. And I feel like I'm giving all of the answers away because we literally just talked about it. So I'm gonna try to find one that maybe we did not talk about just to see if. So that's question 3. I'm gonna give y'all a second. So it says during an initial session with a couple. Hold on, somebody's in the waiting room. During an initial session with a couple seeking treatment to improve their communication, the wife tearfully reports that their arguments frequently get physical because she constantly makes simple mistakes that anger her husband. The social worker should first. So everybody, well, okay, some people put D, some people put B. So let's look. So A, explore the ways in which the wife makes the husband mad. B, discuss a safety plan. C, encourage the wife to move out the home with her husband. And D, refer them to individual therapy. So the right answer, y'all, is D. The right answer is D. When we get into, so when it comes to discussing a safety plan, that's gonna be 9 times out of 10 when they ask you about a safety plan. That's gonna be when you're working with an individual, not a couple. When you're working with an individual in individual therapy, and they report that their spouse at home who's not in therapy, because this person is getting therapy for themselves, but they say my husband is abusive, but I don't want to leave my husband. One of the things that you're gonna do is help that client develop a safety plan. But in this case, this is a couple, they're sitting in front of us, and they have reported, well, the wife has reported that there is abuse going on. So the first thing that we're gonna do, remember, this is the initial assessment, so we have not worked with we have not started therapy with this couple. We are going to refer them out to individual therapy. They're gonna get the help that they need, and then they may come back for couples therapy. Is there a certain template for a safety plan? I don't know. If you can put your email in there, I can try to find a safety plan for you. one that is reputable, and I can send it to your email if you want to list your email for me. That's something I can do. So yes, that answer is tricky, y'all. But remember, when you're working with couples and there is a report of domestic violence, emotional abuse, you're gonna refer them out, or emotional abuse, you're gonna refer them out to individual therapy. When you're gonna create a safety plan is what you're gonna do for a patient, for a client that comes in by themselves for individual therapy and they divulge that they're in an abusive relationship but they don't want to leave. That's when you're gonna create that safety plan. Is there any questions? We have about 9. I am trying to get the email. Is there any questions that anyone has, just maybe about anything that I haven't touched on? And so moving forward, y'all, I'm gonna start doing study groups every Wednesday starting in July. They're gonna be topic specific. So I'm gonna be going over ethics in one group. They're gonna be an hour long and it'll be on Zoom the same way this one is. So I'll be doing ethics. I'm gonna go over the DSM-5, macro social work, and all of those other things that I feel is something that is gonna come up on the exam. They are $35 for one session, or if you want to do 2 sessions, you can get 2 sessions. You can pay for 2 sessions for $65. I'm also going to be doing individual tutoring. So if you ask me for individual tutoring, I'm gonna put my email here, and you can email me because I am starting individual sessions, one-on-one tutoring where we can go over anything that you need more help on. Like if there's something that I said that maybe confuse you, I can go over questions with you like I did tonight that are specific to your needs and try to help you process through those questions so that you can get the right answer. Or if you just need information, if you just need more tutoring, or if you already have like a therapist development center or some site that you're working with, but you need more like one-on-one. I'm somebody like that too. Before I took my exam, I had an entire tutoring session with someone to make sure I was doing it the right way, I was thinking the right way. So that's something that I am offering. So just email me. Also, y'all, I created a Facebook group. The name of the Facebook group is Social Work Test Prep 2.0. So let me put it in here. Social Work Test Prep 2.0. And so I'll be posting a lot of resources on this group. I have study guides that I will be posting on here. I'll go over question and answers. So you definitely want to get into this Facebook group. I'm also gonna be doing things on Instagram. I'm not sure if any of you are my friends on Instagram, but I am working on a lot of things. So you definitely want to stay in contact. When I took my exam, I felt like there wasn't, oh, I'm sorry. So somebody asked, send your Cash App again, please, thanks. So the Sincerely Reginique, that's my Cash App. That @RegRefine, that's my Instagram. And the Social Work Test Prep 2.0, that is the Facebook group, y'all. So definitely go and join that Facebook group. I'm trying to see. I believe that is it, y'all. So if y'all have any questions, anything that I didn't go over, again, I'm gonna start doing the study groups. I'm not sure. So I was thinking about doing them on Wednesday. I'm not sure if Saturday will work better for you all. And if you do want to be a part of that, just be on the lookout. I'll send an email afterwards. Well, I'm not gonna say afterwards. It'll probably be before Monday. I'll send y'all the follow-up email with everything that I talked about. And if you have any questions, just let me know. One last thing, if y'all can do me a favor and give me a review, let me put my personal Facebook page, or even if you want to do the social work test prep, if you want to go on there and do a review, just tell them how helpful the information was. I have a lot more information. I did just take my exam like a month ago. I took the exam again. I needed a 99 on the exam. I got a 121. So I did really well on the exam. I know what's gonna be on the exam. I know how you need to think. I know everything that you need to know. So you definitely wanna get connected with me, stay connected with me. And thank you so much for everybody that's taking the exam. I'm praying that you will pass and that you will get your license, because we are in a field that needs us, y'all. And so I just want to say thank y'all for just choosing social work. It's very rewarding field, but you have to be very selfless. And so I just want to say thank you so much. Your hard work will pay off. You will get your license. I shared a little bit of my story. I failed the first time. The second time I passed it. But I believe that it was for a reason that I didn't pass it the first time. Because the time I did pass it, look at how much I'm able to do and help people. So I believe that everything happens at the appropriate time. Stay positive, don't give up, and you'll get what you deserve. So how much are the sessions on Wednesday? So the sessions are $35. Or you can pay for two, which would be $60, and you would email me at regrefined times. Y'all, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. I don't even know how to. I believe I have everything. Somebody said Janique. Oh my God, did I miss it? I thought it was for 7:30. Yes, Janique. It was for 7:30 at Eastern time. So I'm in Atlanta. I'll see if I can pull something up for you. Thank you so much. I have been having anxiety and haven't found time to study. This really put me in my place. I have to get on it. Yes, ma'am. So it took me a year before I got back up and dusted myself off and said, you know what, Reginique, you're smart. Because the thing is, y'all, we are smart. We are able to pass this exam. We just have to think the way that they want us to think. That's all it's about. Training your mind to think the way that ASWB wants you to think to pass this exam. You are doing a great job as a social worker. You know all of this material. It's just a matter of passing the test. And that's something that I had to tell myself. I had to tell myself, Reginique, this licensure does not define who you are as a social worker. You are an excellent social worker and you help meet the needs of your patients. And so that's what you have to remember. You're a great social worker and you will pass your test. How long did you study the second time? So I took the exam about a month ago. I started studying in January. I was not studying long. I may have studied 30 to 45 minutes a night. And that's another thing. You don't want to over cram yourself. Like, don't spend every day studying for this exam. An hour and a half maximum. Go to bed and get some rest. A week before the exam, that's when you want to study things like drugs. That's when you want to study like the defense mechanisms, because those things are like short-term memory. So drugs, there were questions on drugs, but it was like bipolar disorder. What is the medication of choice for bipolar disorder? Antipsychotics for psychotic disorders and things like that. But those are things that you want to study like a night or two before you take the exam. That's not something that you want to be studying a month or two outside of the exam, because you forget that. That's part of your short-term memory. So I started studying in January. I started studying theories. I started studying, what else did I study? I studied theories. I studied like disorders, and I started to get myself back into the mood of taking the exam. But I'm gonna be honest, it was about a month out when I really got serious about studying for the exam, and it paid off. So I would say I started in January, but really about a month. I really took it seriously for like a month. I failed by one point and didn't take it again for 4 years. Yes, I know the feeling. Actually, I'm gonna tell y'all something. When y'all joined the Facebook group, I tutored a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago who failed her exam by 1 point. She failed her exam by 1 point. She's in New Orleans. She passed her exam Tuesday, y'all. So whatever she did, I helped her study. I did tutoring with her, and she passed the exam. It took her about a year after she took it again because she was sickened that she only failed by 1 point. I know many people who failed the exam by 1 point. So what that means is that it's not a problem with your ability, like with your knowledge. It's not a problem with your knowledge. It's a problem with the way that you're taking the test. So in some cases, you just have to switch it up. But most of that knowledge should still be there. Great advice. Thanks. Did you do anything specific the day of? So I took my exam at 8 o'clock in the morning. Because it is 4 hours. The last time I took it at 2, and I got really tired around like the 5 hour mark. So I took it at 8. They do not let you bring snacks unless you have an excuse from your doctor. Like you have to have a doctor's note to be approved to bring snacks in and put them in your locker. I did take a break. I took a break when I got halfway through. So the test is 170 questions. When I got halfway through that's when I took a break. I got up and I went to the bathroom at about question 85 because I needed to stretch and I needed to just get my mind back running. The first time I took my exam, I did not take a break. I just went straight through it. And I thought that was what contributed to me failing the exam. So if you can, every hour, if you want to take a minute or two to get up, go walk to the bathroom, come back, those things are very helpful. Because of coronavirus, they had shut all of the water fountains off, so my mouth was dry. I didn't have any water or anything that I could drink, but it worked out well. Somebody said I failed by 2 points. I was so hurt. Yes. I know the feeling. Trust me. I know the feeling. I sat in my car. So they didn't have water because of coronavirus. So they didn't have the water fountains on. But I failed my exam by 2 points. I needed a 98 and I got a 96. And I was so sick. I called out of work the next day. That's how sick I was. So I know the feeling, y'all. But what I'm telling you is that if I pass this exam by over 20 plus points, you can do it too. You can do it too. You went to school, you got a master's degree in social work. You can pass this exam. You just need the right person to help you. And that's what I want to do. Water should be, what's the worst that could happen? The water could help. I'm really not sure what they feel. I don't know. But y'all, I am going to hang up. If there's no more questions, email me again, join the Facebook group, follow me on Instagram, give me a review, comment, like, all of that, and be on the lookout. I am going to send another email by the end of the week, just telling you everything about what you all can do to stay connected. And I hope you all have a good night, and thank you for joining me, and you are welcome. Good night.